the net question is, we're not on the same page. How do we get on the same page?
Hmm. Huh. Well, talk about throwing a heavy question out here for us, Nino.
Welcome to the Christ Centered Stewardship podcast with your hosts, Maria Casillas and Nino Villa. Christ Centered Stewardship is a ministry of new money habits designed to equip believers to steward everything God has given them, including their time, talent, and treasure in ways that bring Him honor, glory, and praise. You can join our growing community on Facebook and submit your questions to podcast at newmoneyhabits.com. Now, to begin today's episode, here is Maria Casillas and Nino Villa.
Hey, Maria, I got a question for you. It's the
Okay.
question of the hour. That is, are you generous with your time, your talent, and your treasure?
Yes.
I
And
think everybody would say that they are, but I think it warrants a more thorough investigation, and then we can actually talk about, like, what is that? How do you do that? How can somebody be generous?
I was wondering if you picked up on the question mark at the end of my statement,
Oh,
and the "and" that followed. I would like to think that I am, and I also know that no, not nearly as generous as I could be.
well, one of our core values is generosity as a form of worship.
Mhm.
And so when you say, yes, you are, but not as much as you want to be, and when we say that we see it as like a form of worship, what does that all mean, and how can we be generous in a way that is honoring to God?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really good question, and I'm also gonna say that as we talk about this idea of generosity and what that really means, one of the things that came to mind for me, Nino, is that when I am generous with my time, my talents, or my treasure, it is a reminder that God uses us. And because God doesn't need our money, he's got everything. But he uses us to help bless others. And I want to talk about that for a little bit, but I also want to just first point out that the flip of that is true. And it's a reminder to me that when I am being blessed by others, that is God using others to bless me. And so I just wanted to throw that out there because it was one of the things that
Mm.
jumped out at me while you asked that question. So um, when I am more intentional with my generosity, I think that it it becomes more prayerful, it becomes more of a worship. I think when things are on autopilot, it is more of a worldly obligation that I just am trying to check a box off. And so that to me seems to be one of the biggest differences.
Mm. When you were talking about receiving the blessing, it reminded
Yeah.
me that I was at a mall recently, and this kid had on kid, teenager, whatever, had on this shirt that said something about Christ, his kingdom, something. And I was like, "Hey, brother, I really like the shirt." And he's all like, "Oh, amen." And so he comes over and he hands me this little Jesus. And I'm all like, "Oh no, man, like hold on to it, give it to somebody else." And then the Holy Spirit was just kind of like tugging at me a little bit, like,
Mhm.
go and be gracious about accepting the gift.
Mhm.
Ah,
Mhm.
all right. So I get back up and I was like, hey, you know what? I have to be more gracious about receiving other people's blessings. So, I'll take it, and thank
Yeah.
them for it. So,
And since we're sharing stories, I'm going to share a recent one that happened at the Christmas time. So, my daughter well, I have four, but one of them, the youngest one, is 6, and their aunt gives them a gift every single year. And I think you and I might have talked about this, and we had to reel that aunt in because she
yep.
because she gives too much, right? Well, at the end, she stuck to her 3 gift per child, but at the end of the Christmas, like right at Christmas Eve, she just couldn't help herself. She sent me money through Zelle, and she's like, "Could you please give $50 to each one of your children?" And I said, "Okay, well, what would you like I have to print something out. I'm not just gonna hand them $50." And so I said, "What would
Mhm.
you like it to say?" And she said, "Please say, something like, go and get something that will make you smile." Okay. So we were driving along in the car a couple weeks ago, just shortly after Christmas, and my 6-year-old said to me, we were talking about things that they were going to get, and I asked her, I said, "Well, what would you like to get with your $50?" And she said, "Well, is it supposed to be for somebody else or is it supposed to be for me?" And I said, "Well, I mean, it was for you." I'm not sure if I understood her question. And she said, "Do you remember at Christmas when I gave Alyssa that tiny Jesus?" Because she actually did give her sister one of those tiny ones, and that
Mhm.
one said "God bless you" on it. And it was so
Mhm.
funny because when my daughter opened it, she's like, "Anytime you sneeze, you can look at this little Jesus because it says God bless you." Oh my gosh, my heart was warmed. It was so cute. But anyway, she was recalling that. She goes, "Do you remember when I gave that to Alyssa and it made her smile?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "That made me smile." And so I
Mm.
might want to give something to somebody else so that it can make them smile, which will make me smile. And I was like, I told my husband, I said, "What did we do right?"
Right? How did we
because
get so
because
lucky?
that's not us. Like that was all God. And it was just so beautiful to see this innocence and the I don't know, innocence isn't even the right word. It was just this natural giving of this child she wasn't thinking through it, right? It was just a natural thing that came to her. And I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. And so, yes, we need to be gracious givers, but we also need to be gracious recipients and recognizing that when we receive well, it actually does help that giver to feel
Yes.
that joy as well. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that the Holy Spirit tugged on me that day and is now using you to confirm, like, yes, just be a gracious receiver
yeah.
of other people's blessings. Um, I think about generosity and I think about how that term really has a connotation to it. So often we hear generosity and we automatically think money, right? Like, am I
Yeah.
being generous with my money? Am I giving enough? If I'm a faithful churchgoer, am I tithing? And then am I doing it's like, can we just pump the brakes for a second? Hold on. First of all, remember that God's word tells us that he wants a cheerful giver. And it's not just a giving of your money or possessions, but that we can be very generous in our time and we can be
Mhm.
very generous in our talent. God has gifted us in a particular way, and maybe we can use that to help somebody else in their time of need. And really, all it does is take us showing up and using our skills. And so, I just wanted to talk a little bit about generosity from a wider perspective.
Mhm. And if I may, I'd like to broaden it even more just for a second.
Mhm.
And this is just me kind of confession time. I think for me, sometimes the toughest part for me to be generous is with my time. And I don't mean with my skill set and sharing that time with others. I mean actually giving that time back to the Lord. And so it's that Mary Martha struggle that I have. And
Mm,
I know that this is something a lot of women do struggle with. Maybe men do as well, but that whole like we're nurturing this event and we're providing for all these people and we're serving, we are excuse me, we're hosting, we're preparing all this stuff, and Jesus says, Martha, Martha, like slow down. I'm here. Mary, she sees that being with me is the important thing right now, and that's something that I have to remind myself a lot more often than I care to admit. But here I am sharing that with you.
yeah, I love it because confess to one another so that we can pray for one another so that we can be healed. Um, I want to I want to unpack that a little bit just because you know me, Mr. Practical, right? Like
Yeah.
how do we fix that, right? Here comes the male side of me, like we got to fix that. Like Maria, if you got this issue, we can find a solution. But more to the point, to benefit our listeners who might be thinking, I do also struggle with maybe slowing down and appreciating the moment, and I'm kind of caught up in it. One of the things that come to mind for me is I went through a season some time ago where even doing the most mundane task, I'm just like, I'm just gonna spend this time with the Lord. Like if I'm washing the dishes, I'm with the Lord, either kind of just mentally in prayer. Maybe I throw in some earbuds and I'm actually listening to the audio Bible, or I'm just like singing worship songs or whatever it might be. But like in that mundane, I'm finding an opportunity to make sure that it's time well spent and it's time where like I'm rejoicing in the Lord.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the things that I try to do in order to help solve this issue for myself.
Mhm.
Another, I think, practical thing is just like what we talk about with our money as well, and it's prioritization and just like putting the things first that really need to go first. And so sometimes it means having to wake up a little bit earlier so that we can be in the word at the beginning of the day, whether that is physically or verbally, just audibly, however that needs to be for us. And then sometimes it's kind of smacking ourselves on the wrist when we want to do something different. So, like if the first thing that you do when you wake up is pick up your phone to do something else, like no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this over here. And so it really becomes a mindful thing that we have to do, something very intentional. And so if we're going to be intentional, then we want to make sure we prioritize accordingly.
Yeah. I like that word prioritize because that's what it really means, is to kind of pick what is of most importance. And I know that I had to kind of stack the habits. I had to build it up over time. I'm
Yeah.
mentoring this guy and he wants to go 0 to 60 in like 3.2 seconds. He wants to kind of, I'm sharing with him some things that I'm doing. He's like, "Oh, I want to do that. Oh, I want," and I'm like, "Hold on a second.
Mhm.
This did not happen overnight."
Yep.
Right. I had to kind of build these things, build these practices, build these habits over time. For me, it was I wanted to spend the first part of the day away from the cell phone, in the word, those types of things. Well, when I first got started, I think I don't recall if I actually set a 5 minute timer, but it was like, "Look, can I do this for at least 5 minutes?" Right? Like, can I just be
Mhm.
in quiet space, or can I open up the word and read a chapter or whatever that is? But can I do that for 5 minutes? And that was 3 years ago that I kind of decided I wanted. Now, the first 30, 40, 60 minutes of my day is spent that way, but it didn't start off that way.
Mhm.
And so, prioritizing it, making it important enough, being intentional, all these things kind of lead to that. And so, um, an important reminder.
Yeah.
So, how can somebody be more intentional about being generous with their time, talent, and treasures?
Well, I think one thing to do is to decide ahead of time what you'd like to do. So if you, excuse me, if you are married, you wanted to kind of do that with your spouse. If you are married with children, you can do that as a family. I think it actually encourages the kids to see some of that and they feel like they have some ownership in that. So if you kind of decide ahead of time, here's how much we would like to give, and here are some of the places we would like to try to give to. One of the things that we do with our money is we have a certain amount that we do give to our church, but then we also set aside what we like to call God's fund, FUN, and then D.
Mm,
And so that is money that we've set aside specifically for the moment when it seems like God is asking us to, bless somebody else. So it's
mm,
not pre-planned events, but it's pre-planned amounts, if that makes any sense. And
okay.
that amount just kind of rolls over month to month if we don't see anything, or we do, of course, we always see something, but if we don't see anything that completely takes away what we have there, then it just rolls over and we can continue to add to that and then use it as we see fit. So I think that just takes away some of that stress of, oh my gosh, I would really love to be able to help this person over here, but I don't have the means for that. Now we have those means set aside. It also provides some boundaries for us because it's like, we'd love to help this person. Maybe they need a lot more than we have, but we're able to have already decided this is something that is maybe a little bit I was gonna say comfortable, but I think giving, it's okay to have that create a little bit of discomfort for us. That's, a little bit of that, joining Christ suffering on the cross is just like, here we're gonna give a little bit more than feels good. But it also gives us those parameters so that we can not ruin our family in the meantime.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you said too about thinking ahead of time, just kind of deciding what you want to do. So much like you, we give to the church, but then I have this extra fund where it's like I've I've gone through seasons where I didn't always tithe, and when I wasn't tithing, I was at least putting in a savings account where when the opportunity presented itself, it's like I'm going to go meet that need myself, and so I've been in seasons of both, and now it's like in a season where both are getting done,
Mm,
and one of the places that I know just inherently I want to be generous is in tipping. If the family and I go out, which we don't go out to sit down restaurants all that often. So when we do, I want to be able to give even more than 20%. It, oftentimes, it's not even about a percentage. It's usually like no less than $25, but kind of proportionate to that. Like I want it to be significant enough where the person's like, whoa, that's more than a normal tip. And I want
mhm,
them to see that generosity, not because it's coming from me, but because I also get to leave a note that is based in scripture, where it's like, if you're feeling blessed right now, thank the Lord. Don't thank me, thank the Lord. And so being intentional in that I want to be generous in this area. And so making a plan for how to
mhm,
do that. But as we said earlier, too, it's not just about being generous with the funds that God has blessed us with, but He gives each one of us an allotment of time, and we get to decide how we're going to steward that time. And I know for me, I'm such a numbers nerd that I make charts about like how much time I spend doing certain activities throughout the week. And I know that nearly like 40% of my time is leisure time. And it's like, oh, well, if 40% of my time is leisure time, what can I do to be generous with some of that time for others? And of course, it starts for me anyway in the home first. That's my first ministry. So, how do I spend time, quality time with my wife and with my children? But then after that, I've talked about how I mentor some guys, and I do that it, out of an abundance of the time that I have during the week. It's all like, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about what's going on in your world and how you can um, be more intentional and thoughtful about the things that you're doing in your life. And so, just another way that we can be generous is with our time and giving to others. And sharing the blessings, right? One of the reasons I mentor, one of the reasons those guys want to sit down is they want to be poured into. They want to hear truth. They want to know, how can I be a better husband, a better father? How can I be a better coworker? All those types of things. And so being able to pour into them in a way that doesn't cost me anything but time out of my day.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, that's wonderful.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to cut here, edit to just jump into Ask the Coaches, unless you think there's anything else we need to.
We did a lot of stuff on time. No, I think that's actually really great that you do that. And the one thing I also think we should just mention real quick is the whole idea of our talents. Sometimes that's a struggle for people because it's not as measurable as time
Mm,
and as money is. So I think one of the things that we can do to just know that we're stewarding our talents well is figure out what they are. I mean, how many adults are still going, "I'm not sure if I'm good at that. I don't know if I could actually do that." They haven't tried some of those things. I mean, it feels like as kids, well, not all children, but many children have a natural curiosity for things, and they're willing to try just about anything new, whether they're going to fall flat on their face or they're going to succeed. And I think sometimes we need to be a little bit more childlike with that and start to discover what are some of those talents that we might have that we don't really know about yet. I mean, I think that I don't know all of the details, but I have seen anecdotally things about like the KFC guy started that business at like 75 or something like that.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
older amount, right? And you see things like that where, poets don't realize that they're poets until they're 63. And I just think that that's one of the things that if we can continually be in prayer about and just that curiosity and find out what are we really good at so that we can go steward those things well. And then just, be willing to use the talents that you have in a way that you might never have seen that coming. So myself, for example, I never, ever, ever set out to be a teacher. It's not something that I ever thought I wanted to do. But I say that now. And as I hear myself saying it, I think, you know what, when I was like, I don't know, but probably a freshman in high school, or maybe even younger, I was helping with all of the religious education stuff at our church, and I was teaching children then, but I never really thought that that was what I was called to do. And even now in adulthood, I'm teaching other people's children, not just my own through homeschooling, but other people's through different communities and such. And that's not something I ever thought was for me to do. And yet I know I have this particular ability. And so that's one of the things that I've said, okay, Lord, you want me to do this? I'll do it. And the last thing I'm going to say is that so many times these things are all intertwined, our time,
Mm,
our talents, and our treasure. When we are giving of those things, there is a giving and there's a receiving. I mean, I'm giving my time and my talent through teaching, but I'm receiving blessings, but monetary blessings through doing that. It's not a job, it's not an employment, but it's something that I am receiving. Sometimes it is predictable and sometimes it's not predictable what it is, but all of these things are intertwined. And I think just having that recognition is going to be a good way for us to start to and continue to steward those well.
yeah. I'm glad you brought up the fact that these things often intertwine, because as you were sharing it, I was thinking about how sometimes we are giving of our time, but we don't recognize that we're also giving of a talent. So
Mhm.
I attend a non-denominational Christian church that meets in a high school. So what they call it is portable, right? Because they have to tear it down and build it up each weekend. And so they're like, hey, if your talent is pushing heavy stuff, we would
Yeah.
love to have you, right? So a lot of times people on the setup and teardown crew think that they're just giving up their time. Like, we're volunteering our time because the place needs to be set up. But there is a talent there
Hmm.
of,
Pushing
you can
heavy
push
stuff.
some heavy stuff, and that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. And I think about, as you were sharing too, uh, I volunteer as like a coach for flag football for my son. And at first, I didn't see it as more than just, hey, I'm volunteering like my time. Of course, I have a passion for football and I love the game, but I didn't really see it as more than that. And then I realized, and I should have known this. I mean, I played football. Coaches poured into my life. I can remember certain lessons or whatever. But seeing how the time spent with those young kids and pouring into them and listening to them. I mean, your talent might be that you are a fantastic listener. And so you become somebody that somebody else can confide in, and just, it's called, oftentimes it's called the ministry of presence, right? Just be present. And if you're a great listener, then maybe that is your talent that you are being generous with, is, hey, I'm a really good listener. So I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to let you talk and, and just be. So
Amen to that.
absolutely. Well, speaking of giving some of our time, talent, and treasures, why don't we jump into our Ask the Coach segment, brought to you by nobody in particular. I just wanted to say that because I hear so many podcasts that go into a new segment, and they're all like, "Hey, brought to you by us, by Maria and Nino." Um, this this post comes from a young woman named Zoe. I'm actually not going to get into all of the details of her post, but the net of her post is her and her husband are not on the same page when it comes to elements in their marriage, like finances, spending money, that sort of thing. But you can just tell that there's not a lot of communication there. So the net question is, we're not on the same page. How do we get on the same page?
Hmm. Huh. Well, talk about throwing a heavy question out here for us, Nino. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So, how do we get on the same page? Well, I think one of the first things that we need to know is what page each of us is on. And
Mhm.
and that sounds so simplistic, but it's not. It really is not. Sometimes, I mean, I joke with some of the coaches that some of the couples that I coach, and it's funny because we'll talk about how they'll say, "Oh, we're not on the same page," and we'll unpack some stuff. I'm like, "Guys, you aren't even in the same library. Like, we really need to
Wow.
we got to get into the same building, and then the same book chapter, then we get to the same page." And
Mhm.
part of it is that there just has been very little or no communication about that, and there's a lot of assumptions going on, there's a lot of presuming, and there's a lot of just, again, not knowing our what page each of us is on, let alone the other person, and so there's no communication around that. So that's a lot to say, that we need to start by understanding what we actually bring to the table. What are some of the things that we don't bring to the table so that we can know where do we try to, fix that for ourselves, and where do we need that other spouse to complement where we are, not be nice, but complimentary compliment. So, so I think that's one of the first things that we need to be able to do. What are your thoughts on that first?
Yeah, I'm thinking about different scenarios in which you can apply that, right? So like let's say there's a couple and they're not on the same page in parenting, right?
Uh-huh.
And so being able to communicate what I bring to the table, what I don't bring to the table, whether I'm a disciplinarian or I lack the ability to be a disciplinarian, what I think needs discipline versus what I don't think needs discipline. I've watched as couples have argued over small children. A small child does something, they behave in a certain way, and one wants this behavior corrected and thinks it needs to be corrected, and the other comes in and is all like, let the kid be a kid. And so they don't see the need for that to be corrected. And so I think communicating about, wait a minute, what do we think is behavior that's acceptable and tolerated versus what behavior needs to be corrected and why it needs to be corrected. So I think to your point, it starts with communication and figuring out, you know, what do I think and feel about these things? Because to your point, otherwise, there's like a lot of assumptions. There might be a lot of um, unexpressed expectations, right? So if I see a child climb up onto a table and I think that that's inappropriate behavior, my expectation is that my spouse would also think that that's inappropriate behavior, and we would both be on the same page that that needs to be corrected. Well, if I go to correct that child and my spouse is like, hey, let them be a kid. Oh, hold on. We are not on the same page. We're definitely not in the same chapter. Probably not even reading the same book.
And even if you guys do both agree that that behavior needs to be corrected, there's likely a difference in how said correction should take place. And
Mm.
so I think that it keeps layering. And at this point, people are like, so is there any possibility of this actually happening? It's like, yes, there is hope for all you. It takes time, and it does take that intentionality. It takes the ability and the willingness to pull back those layers and be vulnerable, and also be humble enough to say, I want to invite you into this dialogue about parenting or whatever the situation is at that
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, I think that's an important piece of this whole thing is being able to um, create a space in which ideas are being exchanged, ideas are being heard. I can hear somebody's argument without having to necessarily agree with it, but like let them express their whole idea, and then maybe engage with that idea and try to come to compromise, right? Where it's all like, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. That doesn't mean I'm right, you're wrong. Doesn't mean you're right, I'm wrong. It just means I don't agree. And how can we get to a place where there is agreement, there is compromise, those sorts of things? But it does take a ton of humility, patience, and these are the things that the Bible tells us are love, right? If you love your spouse, love is patient, love is kind, love is not boastful, proud, or rude. It does not demand its own way. So if we can remember the biblical definition of what love is, we open up a space of loving dialogue that just says, hey, we're not on the same page. let's let's learn a little bit more about each other. What do you believe about this, and this? Here's what I think about it. Where do we compromise? Where do we, you know, find common ground so that we can move forward in that common ground?
Yeah. And lest our listeners think that we believe we've got this all put together, I'm just going to put out there that I'm Sicilian, and I'm pretty sure that the Sicilian Bible says something totally different about love. Uh, I'm kidding, of course, but this is all to say that this is a lot easier said than done. I mean, this is
Oh,
something
one.
that, I personally, and I'm guessing you also, we have to continually work on our hearts to get on those same pages and to truly embody that definition of love that we have been given.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not as though I have it all together and I fall short of the glory of God every single day. Um, but at the same time, what's really cool is the more you spend time operating in these things, the quicker they come to your memory when you're
Hmm.
outside of them. So
Yeah.
like when I'm my wife and I, we have rules of engagement when we argue because we're a married couple and we're going to argue. Unfortunately, I wish I could like eliminate that and we just never argued ever again.
Oh, that would. Let's just agree to disagree on that. I think
Uh,
we should.
uh,
I do believe that arguments are good. Otherwise, it means that you have just decided that there's nothing to that you're always on the same page. That's we don't grow when we don't argue. Okay, go
Hey,
ahead.
the
So
two become one. The two become one, Maria.
I
That could,
know, but I mean, my left brain argues with my right brain all the time, and so
fair enough. Fair enough. But the point being, so we have these rules of engagement. And for us, I'll just share them because I think they're fun. Um, I I come from just a history of divorce. My mother was my father's third failed marriage. My mother got remarried and that marriage failed. So like there's five failed marriages in the wake of
wow,
my parents. And then for my wife, her parents stayed together, but there was an unhealthy use of the word divorce as a
like a cudgel,
threat.
like threat.
Threat is, if this doesn't happen, divorce, right? So God gave us the wisdom prior to getting married. Like, look, divorce is not an option. We will always work through whatever we have to work through. So let's not even use it as a threat. And I'm happy to report here we are 17 years of marriage and it's never been used as a threat. The word doesn't come up. So that's one rule of engagement. Another, real quick, is we don't call each other names. Well, I broke this very rule not too long ago, and I was sharing this with somebody else, and the guy kind of scoffed at like that's you calling your wife a name because while I won't call her very derogatory, very offensive names, I said you're annoying, and he's all like, "That's you calling your wife a name?" And I'm like, in the way we have the rules set up, yeah, I'm not allowed to do that. But I share that to say I recognized it very quickly because again, operating in these things and meditating on the biblical definition of love on a daily basis gets us to a point where it doesn't mean we've eliminated every mess up, but when we do misstep, we can recognize that misstep quicker. We can make amends for it much faster. I hurt my wife that day, and um, it took some time to like truly heal. I showed her with my words, hey, I'm apologetic, and I know what I said was offensive and wrong, and I know how it hurt you. But it took a couple of days for her to just kind of, ooh, like that. Not that she was holding it over my head or anything, but she was
Mhm.
just kind of processing through. Man, that really stung.
Mhm. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, my pleasure. So then it begs the question: what is the challenge of the week to our listeners? I think this week it's about the challenge is about performing an act of generosity uh, that you maybe you've been thinking about. Maybe you're like, I really want to do that. I'm encouraging you. Just do it. Just
Mm.
do it. Be generous, either with your time, your talent, or your treasure. But pick an opportunity this week to be generous in a brand new way.
And be intentional about it. Share it with somebody, not to boast. Share it ahead of time if you want to, but just to hold yourself to that. Be intentional with, I'd like to try to do this. Maybe you just set up that account that we talked about where you have like the God Fund. So you
Mhm.
can just, start putting something aside and then be prepared for that opportunity when it shows itself to you.
Amen.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Christ Centered Stewardship Podcast. Follow us on your favorite social media platform for more encouragement and support. And until next time, may the Lord keep you in perfect peace as you set your sight on Jesus.